It's big, it is wild, and it is rowdy. It's, of course, big alpine riding. But when it comes to this monstrously rough terrain, well, what's better for your pedals, flats or clips? Well, I'm just not sure. So today, I'm going to put in the laps to help you make the choice. There are, of course, pros and cons to both. However, there's no right or wrong answer either. It's more actually what suits each individual rider's needs. So I think with that, let's kick things off with clippy pedals. Clip pedals also win medals. The old adage, right? Well, maybe not quite the one, but it is true. Let's just face it, clip pedals have been on top of the podium more times than you can count. So they've got to be the one, right? Well, I mean, there's only one way to find out. So let's look at the pros and cons of what a clip pedal can offer you when it comes to big alpine riding then. So the first pro that these little puppies here are going to give you is improved bike handling. Now, this is essentially how you handle your bike, as the name suggests. So being able to move and maneuver the bike around underneath you. It means you can pick up the bike, push, pull it around without the worry of your feet coming off. And that is obviously a great thing, especially when it does get pretty rowdy out there. Next up is better bike control when it gets rough. Now, very similar to improved bike handling, but actually what I mean here is that basically it eliminates completely almost that element of worry of your feet coming off the pedals. So when it's getting really, really choppy, your feet are going to be trying to skip and dance around. But obviously being attached completely takes that worry out of the equation. So you can focus on just charging hard through a section. For me though, like I just said, it's the big one. It's removing that element of worry when you are riding really, really rough terrain. The big mountains out here, they get choppy with braking bumps, with just really rocky, worn out trails. So if you don't have to think about those feet skipping and dancing around all over the place, well then that's surely got to be a massive bonus, right? But what about the cons of clips? Well, let's have a look at those. There are some cons to using clipless pedals then, especially here in the mountains. First up, they can teach you some bad habits, especially if you learn on them straight away. You'll become reliant on them, dependent upon them, pushing and pulling on the bike. So you're actually just being really poor technique as opposed to sort of dropping your heels and riding like you almost would on flats. This is gonna affect your riding, especially when it comes to choppy, horrible terrain. My next con then is, well, it's a slightly more generic con to a clipless pedal, if you like, but it's one that's sped up when it comes to big, crazy alpine riding. Because the riding is so much rougher and tougher on footwear and pedals, it's the expense of them. Yep, clipless pedals are more expensive and their shoes to go with them. And they wear out even quicker when you are just hammering your way down rough trails like we're going to very shortly. So that means they've got to be replaced quicker, cleats wear out quicker, pedals can take a hammering, and they cost more to fix and replace as well. My last con then, well, it's a bit of a funky one, but when you're riding big alpine stuff, you like to go for the old après bike beer at the end or midday. You're wandering into the bar in your disco slippers and you're clip-clopping around. They're just not quite as comfy as a good set of flats. Imagine just walking like a robot up to the bar and everyone's like, look at this guy. If he had flats on, he'd be so much radder. Yep, they are just a little bit more inconvenient sometimes if you're out all day. Flat pedals win medals. That's definitely the age-old adage. And although it might not be true for all of us, having them on in the big mountains is pretty rad, but there's pros and cons as always to both of the sides of it. So let's kick things off with the pros. Right then, the first pro is that you ain't gonna be clip-clopping around all over the place like some crazy horse looking for water. No, you're gonna be in comfort. Flat pedal shoes and flat pedals themselves are really, really comfortable. They're nice and padded, they have plenty of flexibility in them. The problem with those clips is you're like that, you're like, and you're just looking a little bit crazy. This is obviously great if you're doing long days in the saddle. You know that you're going to be comfortable from start to finish and you haven't got to worry maybe even about taking 2 different pairs of shoes. My next pro is that you can get loosey-goosey buck wild in the Alps, in those beautiful bike parks that are just made for getting a bit wild, and yet you haven't got the fear of being attached to your bike. So say you're coming into a big turn, you can throw a leg out, get old Sam Hill Drift King on it, or you might have seen old Blake dangles a leg on a jump now and again. Well, if you're doing that, you haven't got to worry about unclipping and clipping back in. And obviously, if you're learning all those high-speed trails and things start to get a little bit on edge, well, then you don't have to fear of crashing. Basically, you're not attached to your bike. You're not going to go flying with a bike following in behind you, because that ain't fun. I can tell you, I've been there. A bike to the back of the head is a no-go. A final great pro for flat pedals is, yeah, you guessed it, it's the opposite to clips, of course. They're a little bit cheaper. And actually getting into it is cheaper as well, because you don't necessarily need a full-on fancy pair of flat pedal shoes to begin with when you want to start riding in the Alps. You can just chuck on any flats. However, when you do advance, you might want to think about a good grip pedal combo. But like I said, it's cheaper. You can do it straight away. You don't need to buy fancy pedals and shoes to get riding in the Alps. No, you don't, not at all. Flat pedals, there are negatives, and here they are. Let's face it, when things get rough, bike control, unless you're quite experienced on flats, is pretty hard going, because, well, it's going to skip and dance around underneath you. And unless you're really got good bike position, you're digging those heels in, you got a good shoe pedal combo gripping in there, you're going to find obviously that your feet are just going to be like skipping on top of the pedal. They really want to be dug deep into the pins there to be able to push and maneuver the bike around. And obviously when it comes to bunny hopping and manual things like that, you're not going to be reliant on the clip to pull up on the pedal. So that's where, again, the technique comes into play to actually be able to do a good proper hop. Next up, these things can be full-on ejecto pedals, especially when it gets really rough and bouncy on the trail, because essentially your feet aren't attached again, like I said. So if you hit a big compression or a big buck and you're not dug in deep, well, then your whole body weight shooting up is going to find it really hard to stay down and planted on those pedals. And not only that, obviously, when it's chattery and horrible and your feet are just bouncing on top of the pedals, you're going to find that real tricky too. Another negative that I found to big Alpine riding when it comes to flat pedals is that you really need to have actually the right pedals and shoes to get the fullest effect out of them. If you are riding in your Yeezys and your plastic pedals, well, let's face it, you probably aren't going to have much grip, because the braking bumps and the forces on these big tracks are really, really high. So unless you've got a good shoe pedal combo where you can really see the pins digging in the bottom, and it makes it really tough for the shoe to move around on there. If that shoe's going like that, well, then you're in for a stinker of a ride. So yeah, again, a good shoe and pedal combo is going to be crucial to getting the most out of these big trails out here. Well, there we have it then, flats or clips, big Alpine edition. I hope it's been some help to you next time you're thinking what pedals you're going to stick on when you are shredding those big old laps. If you've got any bits that you do maybe for flats or clips, some pros or cons that you can think of, let me know in the comments down below, because I always like to hear. It's been great fun. I'm going to head into the mountains. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, I'll see you later.